Namaste, Aditi. Thank you for joining me in this session, and particularly so because you are one of those very few young people who made me acutely conscious of how embarrassing and an inner torture and a block to our own spiritual progress can it be to not be able to practice what we know, and even more than that, to start talking about what we are unable to practice ourselves. Just to introduce the topic, uh, the gap between knowledge and practice is extremely common. We all know so many things, but because of various temptations, obligations, compulsions in life, we are not able to practice all that. But that is something that remains within the ordinary person. He can realize the gap, is sometimes troubled by it, but it stops there. Then there are people who have this gap, but at the same time, all that they know, they are not very hesitant to talk about in drawing room conversations to impress others. And these others, when they sometimes come to know what these people are actually practicing, criticize them usually behind their back. बातें तो इतनी बड़ी बड़ी करते हैं और करते actually खुद क्या है? That sort of a thing happens. But then that also doesn't probably do that much harm and is not such a serious issue because that is again so common. Now, let's move a little further. Everybody knows that smoking and drinking are not good for health. Doctors know it even better than others. And yet, so many doctors smoke and drink. And uh, at the same time, all of them tell their patients not to smoke or drink. But then this passes for a variety of reasons. Firstly, they don't smoke and drink in front of the patient. And if by chance some patients come to know that they do smoke and drink and are bold enough to point this out, the doctor can just get away by saying, uh, do what I say, not what I do. Uh, so it stops there. And it can stop there because, uh, although I mean, it's not strictly right, we feel that my body, my business. If I don't mind dying a few years earlier and I enjoy smoking and drinking, why can't I do it? I'll not get into why that is not a proper stand in terms of spirituality and the yogic practices. But at the same time, ordinarily speaking, the doctor can get away by feeling so that my body, my business. I'm telling you what is in your, what is good for you. So you better practice it. And doctors sometimes also feel that if I get some disease, I'll come to know about it very early. And that's the time at which I can stop all this and the disease can perhaps be reversed. But then the problem multiplies enormously when it comes to spiritual teachers because they know so much about spirituality and they feel tempted to share it. And sometimes they are less hesitant to share it because once upon a time, Upanishadic knowledge was considered a secret knowledge. And it could be kept so to be given only to the few who deserved it, who were ready for it, whose receptivity was good in terms of all the homework that they had put in their previous lives, and they were evolved enough to be able to receive that knowledge. But today, uh, they are available everywhere. They are available not only in print, or you can go to the internet and find every Upanishad on a variety of sites, so anybody can read them. So it's no longer hidden knowledge. And the curiosity about this knowledge is also widespread. So many spiritual teachers feel that at least let's try to explain it, simplify it for those who want to know it. But at the same time, this embarrassment everybody has faced. And I realized it perhaps for the first time in the year 2000 when I established the Integral Health Clinic at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, and I started speaking about yoga and spirituality and a healthy lifestyle regularly because every fortnight we'll have a new set of participants who'd join us, and then I would give them a few talks on these subjects, besides, of course, healthy eating and things like that. So I particularly made a conscious choice not to talk about the spiritual worldview, although I had some idea of it by then. And this restraint persisted for almost 10 years. It was only about 10 years later that I started talking about the spiritual worldview and how that can help us look at the uh, purpose of life and how it can be helpful in stress management. Because stress management one can talk about even without getting into the spiritual worldview. So that's what I was doing for almost 10 years. And therefore, when you talked about this problem, I could understand it and I've reflected upon it and Before I go further, maybe I'll start with you by making an introductory remarks that you like to make, and then take up the question that if it is embarrassing, if it is uh, a source of not only inner pain but also can hinder our own spiritual progress, why do most spiritual teachers, including both of us, why do we do it?
I think the simplest answer to the why is because all human beings have an impulse to share. And teacher, no teacher, all of us are human beings who are wanting to share what we know. It is really like that basic human nature. You get to know something, you find out something. It is like there's a treasure I discovered, and I just go out shouting, like, hey, I discovered that. Because I also carry a part of my personality which is as normal as every human being. Like all of us have that. It's only when you start working on yourself at a deeper level, you get that stability with time that what to share, when to share, how much to share, and be very, very conscious of that sharing is something which comes out of you. You are not your sharing. So I think when you get that discernment that sharing is just a part of your work and your work is not deeply identified with what I share, I am. So when there's that sense of discernment and identification, then there's a lot of purification that happens on your own. Because we keep talking about these things, it's very tricky because normally, whenever you say something which is unattainable, or when you talk about something which is far away from humanity, so to speak, you kind of become that middle person. And because human beings in general don't have that experience, they want to live through your experience. And that can create a sense of identity that I am the one, like leading the way. Like we speak, no, there's a subtle difference between becoming the messenger or becoming the message. So often there's a lot of charm around becoming a messenger. And of course, in all its sincerity, like we never question people's sincerity because all of us are doing work in general for the upliftment of consciousness, for the upliftment of good, that the world becomes a better place to live in. So everybody's intentions are at place. But simultaneously with the intention comes a lot of action and a constant being at guard that whatever word I'm saying, like whatever is coming out of me, how pure the intention is. And if I catch myself, because of course we are also working on ourselves. It's not that like now I've worked, I've attained something, now I'm sharing. So it's like we always give that example of school. No? Somebody's in first, somebody's in second, somebody is in 10th, somebody is doing their PhD, somebody is doing their postdoc. But everybody is in the school of life. So nobody is beyond the scope of school of life. It's just that whatever little somebody knows, sometimes it's also good for a PhD student to come back to first standard and revise the basics. So it is really that interactive platform, and to be mindful of that nobody is beyond the periphery of the school. So everybody is coexisting in the school and learning. Like last time when we were talking about that integral yoga as an interactive yoga. So remembering that space, that it's an interactive space, and not making what is coming out of me as my identity, but as an offering. So if that identity and offering are two different things, the balance is much easier to maintain. And then, of course, continuously working on yourself, like how I've made that statement, which I keep using, no, conscious living is a full-time job. So if we are doing our job 24/7, then it's just a matter of time that we share what we live and we live what we share, and it becomes a cycle. So at least that's the beginning, the framework which I would like to share.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that sentence, which bears repeating, that conscious living is a full time job. And that full time includes the time when we are talking about spiritual topics in public. So, in that sense, it can also be done consciously. So, the question is not whether to do it, but how to do it. If we do it consciously, then that can become a source of or a tool for our own spiritual growth and also inspire the spiritual growth of so many more. And that is something which is perfectly valid and understandable. And that happens because, as you said, I mean, the main thing is sharing, and sharing particularly a treasure. And this happens particularly in the early stages of our own sadhana, because when even glimpses or rudiments of spiritual wisdom make us feel that, oh, why didn't I discover it earlier? It's so rewarding, easy, and insightful. These are the types of reactions that one has in the beginning. Although difficulties come later and we realize that it is a long journey. But then when it has been just discovered, there is such a euphoria, such an exhilaration that one wants to share the treasure, as you said. And it becomes a part of our work after a certain stage because what we have is to be shared. And in fact, the basic thing in spiritual growth of an individual remains loving others, loving all, and expressing this love by giving what we have to those who need it. So long as we have this and we are giving it in that spirit, and only to those who need it, because they are the ones who are likely to come to us or listen to us, not just going around telling everybody, because as Sri Aurobindo says, I mean, by and large, this the current stage of evolution on Earth is such that most people are quite content to live at the physical vital level. So we don't have to talk about it to just about everybody, but those who are self-selected, volunteer to come to listen to us or on any platform, there's no harm in sharing if we do it in that spirit. Uh, and in fact, I have found some justification from one of the speakers who once said that I might not have climbed the Everest. Everest is the peak, the highest mountain peak in the world. And one way of looking at the summits of spirituality is also as a sort of a peak. So I might not have seen the Everest, but that doesn't mean that I can't share with others the joy of seeing pictures of the Everest. So I have also seen only the pictures, and then I can show those pictures to others and share with them. So that is what I am doing. And of course, one can find uh, many reasons why still one should not do it. And one of them, of course, is, I've been saying repeatedly, that the inner pain that it gives us. And in fact, you made it very clear one day. I remember when I was insisting on you to talk more and more. And the way you put it was, आप समझते नहीं है मुझे कितनी तकलीफ होती है जब मैं सब बातें बोलती हूँ. Now, it's difficult to sort of express the same tone and the same language in same thing in the English language, but you can't. But what you essentially said was, you can't understand how much pain it gives me when I talk about all these things. So uh, that's why I became even more conscious that yes, this is so. So apart from that, there's another thing I think why sometimes you feel that perhaps you should not do it. It's because it gives us an ego boost, because we can ourselves get deluded that if I'm talking so much about something, then probably I'm also practicing it, and that I have gotten there. So it creates a uh, illusion of spiritual progress which has still not taken place. And this gets further accentuated by those who are listening to us, because they know very little about us. They uh, know only our outside and not what is going on within us. And therefore, they start admiring us. They assume that whatever we are talking about, we have practiced and experienced. And they sometimes come on the borders of worshipping us. Now, when they do that, that becomes a further ego boost. And the important thing is to know, to not to be taken away by that, should not stick to us. Na lipyate. Should not stick to us, should not cling to us. We should realize that these people are doing it because they know very little about me, and this should not affect me. That should be again a conscious choice, that let this not affect me. I know where I am and how much more I have to go on the path. So if that should not stick to us. Uh, so I think what is emerging is that one can still do it in spite of all these limitations and difficulties. Uh, the next question then arises, how to do it? Would you like to say something on that?
You said how, and I just looked at on my desk the calendar quote for the day. And the quote for today is, no joy comes when you take the right attitude. So it's such a apt thing for our interaction right now. And it's like any other work which you do, like place your intention at the right space. And in the field where we are dealing so much with subjectivity, have your own benchmarks. Like for me, I always see that when I'm speaking about any aspect of, say, integral yoga or integral psychology in that respect, if somebody from the audience rejects it completely, do I question myself based on that? How do I feel about it as a person? How do I feel it about the concept I'm talking about? So if I feel a deep sense of rejection, if somebody is rejecting what I say, it's a red flag for me that I'm too identified with what I'm talking. I want people to accept this teaching because behind that, I want them to accept me. So if something like that happens in a situation, then that is known that something needs to be tweaked in your way of sharing. So how much you share without charge, without identification, and in a way which is not creating a distance between knowledge and the receiver, but bringing the knowledge and the receiver together. And it will only reduce the gap when you are very transparent. Because if you are coming in the way of knowledge and the person or the people who in general who are receiving it, that means that you have not worked enough, that you are not transparent. Because if you are transparent, then they can meet. Because the real agenda, the real aspiration is to bring them together. And in that process, you also go closer. So if there's some sort of veil or some sort of hindrance in this process, that means that we need to relook at our method. And also to be very mindful of repetition. Like at least that's what I see, that if I say something in the audience or anybody I'm talking to is like, yeah, that's true. And I immediately see that becoming a part of my identity. And then I take that as my entry point the next time I speak. So then I'm not being very true to the situation that I'm receiving the sharing, but my ego or my surface nature is giving the sharing because the sharing was accepted previously. So how much am I present in that moment while sharing? Because we're sharing something which is everywhere. So the more transparent, the more silent I am, I can receive. So am I receiving or am I retrieving? Like that is one indicator. Because if I'm retrieving from my surface, it is an already accepted world of knowledge, which I'm like, this is safe to speak. But if I'm receiving, I might receive something which might be rejected, but it is received through me in all its sincerity. So I honor it. So honoring the space, honoring the receptivity in your own self, honoring whatever is around you without being attached to how it is taken, which doesn't mean that nobody's understanding I'm still going on in my own land. That is also not what I mean. But really being present and like generally we say the spirit in which the work is done. But I think in this case, it's more of the sincerity of the spirit which comes in, and also learn to say no when you're not open, because sometimes you're not open, you're not receiving, so I'm not sharing. So but if it's my identity, then I'm like, oh, it's my responsibility, like you were speaking about the illusion. So it's like the people are dependent on me for knowledge, so I have to do it. I can't say no. So just becoming aware of the way you say, like often I've heard people speak, even when I speak sometimes, like how I said I speak. So how much are you referring to that I am telling you, or how much are you referring to the knowledge which is being shared? So these are very subtle points. If you become very, very conscious, you realize that how much are you attempting to make knowledge your own. And for example, not just knowledge in terms of the masters. For example, in my, like I can only speak from my experience, that I know that sometimes when I'm speaking about what mother has spoken about or what Shrabindo has written, and if I'm not feeling too connected, I see myself hiding behind their name. I see myself that if I'm not sure, I'll say Shrabindo said that, or mother often used to do this. So taking cover behind the masters. So we know that masters are holding us. I mean, there's no doubt about it in our own experience. But sometimes it is like the most precious part of me is being used by the not so, like the naughty part in me, so that the totality looks like, oh, the identity is right. So just becoming aware of your inner mechanisms without charge. So be free and see that when a part of you is only trying to overuse it, a part of you which is whatever is happening without any sort of judgment. So that really brings the how of you, not the how which is standardized. Because in this field also there are a lot of standardization. Like I always talk about this, and I think we have spoken about it so many times that even in places where they're talking about spirituality and how to go about in the inner realm, they still introduce the speaker up from their personal surface achievements and accomplishments. So the duality is right there at our face. I mean, I'm talking about something which is to go beyond, but the way I'm sitting on the panels, the way I'm like, just the setup is too surface to talk about inner because that is a standard the mind understands. So daring to be different and honoring the difference. I mean, I can just go on and on about this because that's the lens I have when I look around in the last few years I've seen. But essentially bringing down to the fact that respecting your process and also respecting the space. And of course, all the qualities which we talk about step by step. And yeah, respecting the process is key. And learning to know when to draw a line without overstepping the deep need of identification which every human being carries. Yeah, I think we can shift over to your views on this now.
Thank you. And as you said, you could go on and on because you have sincerely sort of reflected on this issue for so many years by now. And that's really creditable. And I really can't add much to how to do it except to re-emphasize some of the major points that you made. And one thread that runs through the entire thing is sincerity. So if we are sincere about our intention, sincere about our own standings, sincere about why we are doing it, and uh, sincere all the way through, then uh, perhaps one can do it. Secondly, uh, you again came up with one of those gems, receiving versus retrieving. Mm. Now, uh, if we sit down to speak, all right, if we first try to put ourselves in that mode of consciousness, that whatever I already know has also been received from a higher source, and whatever now I will speak or write will also come from the same source. I'm only serving as a channel. If we do that, I found that in fact we are able to do a much better job and go beyond what we already knew, leave aside beyond what we practice. And one wonders, how did these words come to me? Did I really speak it? Did I really write it? After some time, you can't yourself believe that you did it. And that happens. Now, this needs one more negative, and that is one should not go on for too much preparation while doing such things. Because too much preparation would then hinder this process of receiving. Uh, Certainly, I mean, one should not try and have a written script and read it out the way one can do in many other ordinary lectures. That is not something to be done in this type of sharing, this type of discussions. And with minimal preparation, preparation primarily consisting of what we have imbibed over a long period of time, some of which we have been able to practice. And then at that moment, consciously making ourselves completely open to receiving from that higher source rather than retrieving and sharing it. So if that is the way it is done, then yes, it can be done. And that can happen partly if we do it in moderation, which means that one has to have that balance between sharing and inner work, or outer work and inner work in general. In this case, our outer work is primarily sharing. I mean, people like you and me is primarily sharing through writing and speaking. So have that balance, which means leave some time aside when it may seem as if we are doing nothing, but actually that inner work is going on. So that's also important. So, as one of our sincere and very senior seekers who is unfortunately left his body, Dr. Mangesh Nadkarni once uh, uh, put it that when I invited him for a talk, he said, I'm afraid for the last few days I have been externalizing a little too much. That was his only reason for not refusing to come for that talk to speak once more. I have been externalizing a little too much during the last few days. So it means one has to have that balance between externalizing and restraining ourselves from externalizing and instead doing that inner work. And again, if I turn to him, it was he who once or twice, several times would say that don't get carried away by all what I am saying. I myself have not experienced it or I've not seen it. I'm just talking about it. Now, that can be done again in two ways. Once again, sincerity creeps in. If it is done out of sincere humility and as a confession which will uh, help us and help those who are listening to us, If we do it in that spirit, then it shows. On the other hand, if it is done as some sort of a superficial humility, which is coming from our own ego, see how humble I am. If it is done in that spirit, then again it will show the way you say it. Somehow, this is something very subtle. I mean, the vibrations are picked up. So if a person is doing that seriously, oh, sorry, sincerely confessing that I'm talking about all these things, but don't think that I know all this through my own experience or actually am able to put it into practice. Or sometimes when it comes to practice, I know it is difficult to practice, even I can't do it. So, that sort of things should keep coming in when we are talking about these things, and they should come sincerely. So, if we keep making those sincere confessions, have some sort of a balance between externalizing and refusing to externalize, uh, then probably we should do it. And certainly, what's most important, in spite of all that, there may be a lot of admiration that comes from those who uh, read what we write or listen to us. We know that we should know that, well, all that admiration should not stick to us, it should not cling to us. So, any other thoughts that you would like to share might have crossed your mind in the last few minutes? Any other received ideas that you would like to share?
I was just, when I was listening to you, it was more like we keep repeating that statement, no, all life is yoga, all life is yoga. It has kind of become like the mantra for all of us. And while you were saying this, it just occurred to me that it is such a wonderful opportunity to just live and breathe this philosophy and just be blessed that we have given us circumstances to practice it on a day-to-day basis. And in the same spirit, sharing also becomes part of the practice. So it is not I'm practicing, I'm sharing, I'm practicing, I'm sharing. Even while sharing, I grow. And that is why it's a very essential part. So, like some errors which I also carried in the beginning, that because we are talking about experience so much, that once I experience everything, then I'll share. And then over a period of time, I recognize that even that is an egoistic error. That I need to be sure, I need to be safe, that I know I understand, and then I go out in the world. So at one level, I'm saying that I want to bring in my experience, but somewhere, if I look deep down, it is also coming from that need for safety and security. That what if I say something which is not right or something which needs to be questioned? So I want to play safe. But the space in which we are operating is such that it's only by doing you learn. It's only that you have to do it in all its sincerity. So it's not that I have to read and know everything what Mother and Shrabindo have written and spoken ever, and then only I feel eligible to speak about it. So somewhere also becoming aware of your own errors, because you also have that surface which you carry with you. So if I'm going to speak somewhere, my surface is going with me. I just need to make sure that my surface is not noisy enough to obstruct the knowledge. But it's still there, it's sitting with me. I can't just leave it. So how do I work around that noise and make it silent so that the knowledge can pour in? And sometimes if the noise is too much, then my surface should also be ready enough to share it. Like Mother has said, no, it's always like to school teachers, like presence over preparation, but preparation is also important. So the day when you're not feeling connected and you have to give a class in the ashram school, like I think somewhere in the talk she has spoken, so then you should go back to the preparation you have made. But already in the beginning, when you enter the class, sense the class, see where the students are, what can you bring to the class. So the presence is primary. But sometimes, like we say, that we also carry a surface nature. Sometimes there's too much disturbance or there's no inner connect. Then what is already prepared, like the retrieval part, then use that retrieval part. So in our head also, we should not make those stark differences between, oh, this has to be done like this. The idea is that just sense the situation and experience and continuously. It's like I'll just maybe end and pass on to you with the closure. The joy comes when you take the right attitude. It is like when I'm sharing about something which I live, breathe, it's like I'm talking to the divine within, and that conversation I'm sharing with the world. So then I don't have to think before talking to the divine. I don't have to hide anything from the divine. I just have to in pure joy share and just have that conversation. And if I'm doing that conversation in so much delight, so much transparency, then I'm just bringing that to the world as well. And then give choice to the world, that choose what you want. But if I only filter it based on what image I hold, then when it's reaching it, it's like multiple filters. So just bringing the joy of being in the divine presence to the world in whatever manner you want. And I think that's the spirit which all of us attempt to carry. And the more we carry it, the more we become that. Then it's like you are the message and you just live it in all its sincerity. And as you grow, you watch your error, you work on it, you offer it. So, yeah, becoming the teachings, becoming the message, I think, is the message for the day. So, yeah, I think we can close with your ideas.
And thank you, Aditi. I think the key word that emerges is sincerity. So basically, we know what to do and how to do it, but we have to be totally sincere about it. And that is something that worth reminding ourselves about repeatedly, that we have to be sincere. And the mother, of course, has her ways of sending us the right words at the right time, including the quotation that you discovered today in the perpetual calendar, which was so timely. Uh, I'll close with one more quote from the mother, uh, which is relevant to the subject, and that is to know is good, to live is better, to be that is perfect. So, to know is good, but it's good as a beginning. To live is better, to practice what we know is better than just knowing it. And then comes that somewhat enigmatic sentence to be that is perfect. Now, what is it to be? When we are living what we know, uh, we have to make a conscious effort. Sometimes we fail to live what we know. So those failures are also there. So succeeding in living the way we know is helpful, but failing to practice what we know, it can also be helpful during that inner work when we start feeling why I could not do it. Next time I resolve to, in a similar situation, to do what I already know. And therefore, the failures as well as successes in living what we know are helpful in further progress. But then, when it comes to be, that is perfect, we don't have to make a conscious choice because we have become what we know. The message and the messenger, that division disappears. That is, of course, the terminal point, which means that at that stage, no conscious choice has to be made. One is that which one knows, and what one knows is the divine, because that is the goal. So, when you have become that, that is to be, then no conscious choice has to be made. To do what should be done becomes second nature to us. Doesn't require the intervention of the ordinary thinking mind, because the mind is totally illumined, be it the vital, be it the mental, they reflect that light so fully that there's no conflict, and so does the body. And the result is that the body and the mind, the physical, vital, and the mental, work together uh, without having to make any conscious choice, uh, spontaneously, the way one should. So that is to be. So, with that, maybe we can close with a moment of silence.